Om Shrutismritipurananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Ajnanam Janhavitirtham Vidyatirtham Vivekinam Sarvesham Sukhatam Tirtham Bharati Tirtham Ashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvajnam Vidhushe Karabharati. Dear friends, we meet yet again on another session of our discussions on the Prakarana Grantha titled PRABODHA SUDHAKARA. So far, we have seen 2 chapters of this text, that is the Deha Ninda Prakaranam and Vishaya Ninda Prakaranam. The central theme of this text is to enable the seeker of Atma Vidya, that is the seeker of moksha, to get all the qualifications which are required for obtaining the eligibility to enter into the study of the scriptures, to understand the import of the scriptures, the purport of the scriptures, and therefore to understand the real nature of the self or the Atman, and thus become free from samsara, which is what we call as moksha. So towards this end, Bhagavad Padacharya, who is the author of this text, is presenting to us the teaching in a systematic way. By systematic way, what we mean is the plan or the method of teaching should start from wherever the seeker is, wherever the seeker finds himself in his mind, whatever the understanding may be for the seeker, from that point of from that beginning position, the text leads us one step at a time into higher and more refined understanding. So here, the Shastra being Vedanta Shastra, that is the Shastra which teaches us about the nature of the self. So all the teaching is really about pointing out what is not the self, that is the Anatma. Discussion about the Anatma, clear understanding about Anatma, that is what is not I. If I identify what I am not, then eventually I will have to come to the correct understanding of what I am. With this motive in mind, Vedanta and hence Bhagavad Pada is presenting to us the systematic understanding by rejecting or pointing out that these things which we habitually associate ourselves with are not the self, and one should become free from them by understanding. In that process, the first chapter presented to us that the Deha, that is the physical body, the gross body, is not the self. The main idea presented in the first chapter was this Deha which is earned via karma. The physical body is earned via karma and it goes away due to the exhaustion of prarabdha. So this body which comes and goes cannot be the self, which is the eternal entity which I am. So with this central understanding in mind, various further logics were presented there, and ultimately the conclusion is that this body is not the self. This body is accompanied with various defects, whereas the self, which is eternal, it is defectless, it is pure, and therefore it cannot be the body. So never associate with the body. That is the purport of the first chapter. Then the next chapter, the Vishayalinga Prakaranam, pointed out the various defects in the Vishaya or the sensory objects with the motive of enabling us to become free from desire towards the sensory objects. Following this line of reasoning, now Bhagavad has arrived at Manoninda Prakaranam. That is, the motive of this chapter, the goal of this chapter is to point out, essentially it is to point out that this mind, which has very many influences, it cannot be the self. And therefore, one should not give in to all the demands of the mind. The mind has its own collections of demands, which arises due to some reason or the other, you will see. So whenever demands are made by the mind, the person, the entity, that is what I identify as mind, I go behind those demands, or I work so that I will have to satisfy all those demands. Now what Bhagavad is giving the teaching in this particular chapter, through that teaching what he wants to tell us is that don't give in to the demands which the mind is making. This is the essence of this chapter. How do you not do that? He gives us some specific direction. But even before that, he introduces us to a specific kind of an exercise, an observational exercise, one may say, by which one observes one's own mind. By observation of one's own mind, one can arrive at certain conclusions or facts about how the mind operates, and this will be crucial to handle the mind in an appropriate way. Handling the mind in appropriate way is very important for Vedanta sadhaka, because the mind itself is the source for all the problems, and it is also the enabler for all the solutions. Mana eva hi manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho, Shestra Shastra. The mind which is connected to the world, the mind which is attached to the various sensory objects, the mind which is plagued by the desire, that mind is the source of bandha or sorrow. The mind which is free from the sensory objects, the mind which is unattached, the mind which is filled with dispassion towards the world, that mind is the source of moksha or the enabler of the moksha prayatna. So the mind being the core of the entire Vedantic sadhana, it is very important to handle the mind, and therefore there is a reason for criticism of the mind which is attached very much to the various objects in the world, which is filled with desires. And that kind of a mind is what is being criticized in this chapter. So let us continue reading the verses. So here in the first verse, in fact in the first few verses, this is a very short chapter. We are going to see that the way Bhagavad is introducing the mind is from a third person's point of view. So the imagination that we should possess, or our thinking should be in such a way that suppose you are able to observe yourself from a third point of view, going about your thoughts, going about your feelings, how would you observe yourself? What would be the kind of things which you would see in your own mind? This exercise is very, very important in order to understand the nature of the mind. That is what Bhagavad is helping us to do. So let us read. Hasati kadachit pravuti bhrantam सप्तश दिशो भ्रमति हृष्टं कदापि रुष्टं शिष्टं दुष्टं च निन्दति स्तौति. So you can see here a number of verbs which are being talked here, mentioned here in this verse. Hasati, Rauti, Tisho Bhramati, Dasha Tisho Bhramati, Hrushtam, Rushtam, Shishtam, Dushtam, Indati, Stauti. So various states of the mind, various actions which are done by the mind are being described here. By whose mind? By our own mind. Our normal state of affairs is we think that, or we are so much identified with the mind that we cannot distinguish what the mind is requesting for, what the mind is feeling, what the mind is doing, separate from what I think, what I feel, and what I want, what is good for me. Since we are so much identified with the mind, these actions and these feelings are attributed to oneself. So it is not that the mind is feeling sorrow or happiness, it is that I am feeling sorrow or happiness. This is one of the mistakes which Vedanta says that we routinely make, and this verse here is, you can say, a typical verse or an exemplary verse which points out that primary mistake of confusing the mind's nature with the nature of the self. Identifying the mind with the self, that is the mistake, and by reading this verse one can intuit that mistake. The plain meaning of the verse is as follows: Kadachit hasati. What is kadachit hasati? So somebody, something is, sometimes it is laughing, sometimes it is smiling. Kadachit hasati. Kadachit rauti. Sometimes it is crying. What is crying? The mind. Our mind is crying. Our mind is sorrowful. Sometimes our mind is filled with happiness. Bhrantam sat. So it is as though it is a mad person. So why is Bhagavad Padar saying it is like a mad person, or it is filled with madness? Bhrantam sat means what? It is possessed, or it possesses the nature of being a person who is extremely disturbed or mad, roaming around here and there and so on. Why does he say this? Because you see, the mind doesn't have a singular, a constant state. It never remains in a constant state. It is all fluctuating, as evidenced by these first two words, Hasati and Ravati. Sometimes it is sorrowful, sometimes it is happy, sometimes it is possessed by different emotions as being listed out here. So, as though it is like a person who is mad or a person who is disturbed, it roams about here and there, moving from one emotion to another. It is filled with bhranti or confusion. It is perpetually in a confused state. It doesn't have a constant state. It never remains in a fixed state. It is always fluctuating. Bhrantam sat. Dasha disho bhramati. So since it is confused state, it is moving around here and there without settling on any particular state forever. Hrushtam kadapi rushtam. Sometimes it is angry rushtam, sometimes it is happy rushtam. Shishtam dushtam cha. Sometimes it acts as though it is a faithful servant, shishtam. Sometimes it acts as though it is a good person, it is a very faithful person, it is a very, it is adhering to the Shastra. Dushtam cha. Sometimes it is acting as though it is not at all adhering to the Shastra. It is acting as though it has an independent mind of its own. See the way we say it, the mind has an independent mind of its own. Why it is acting in this way, we don't understand. Whereas the Shastra is saying something, the mind is dragging us in some other direction. So it is sometimes acting like a dushta, as a person who is not acting according to the Shastraic disciplines, Shastraic doctrine. So it is like that. Nindati stauti cha. So sometimes it is praising, in the mode of praising somebody or oneself. Sometimes it is in the mode of criticizing or speaking harshly about somebody. That is nindati. So it moves about these various emotions as though it is a confused state all the time. While listening to the verse, my dear friends, while listening to the verse, we may all appreciate this, but our very nature is, even my own nature is, when we switch off listening to these higher ideals, when we forget about these higher ideals, we go back into the default state, which is we ourselves go along with the mind on all of these, in all of these directions. So we pray, or we should try our level best to ensure that we don't go along with the mind, as the mind goes about these various emotions one after another, as though it is a crazy person. How to do that? We hope Bhagavad Prasad will help us with that, and that will happen. So this is the first verse. Continuing this line of thought, Bhagavad Prasad here is presenting the mind as though it is a possessed entity. It is as though a ghost which is possessed. One may hear about a person who is possessed by a ghost, but here there is a ghost or a ghoul, 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 which is possessed by another entity, another monstrous demon. And what is that monstrous demon? We will read. Kimapi veshti sarosham hyatmanam shlagate kadachitapi vittam pishachamavavat rakshasasya trishnaya vyaptam. Kimapi dveshti. So it hates someone or the other. Kimapi dveshti. Something or the other it hates. Sarosham dveshti. So it hates with a lot of anger. The mind is furious towards somebody. Hi atmanam shlagate kadachitapi. Sometimes it praises oneself. So it can hate other persons. Sometimes it can praise oneself. Alternatively, also it is possible. Sometimes it may hate oneself and praise others. That is also definitely possible. So it moves about in these random states of mind. The mind itself has a mind of its own. Without any limit, it keeps on hopping from one emotion to another and so on. This mind, chittam, is therefore as though it is like a pishacham. It is like a mind monster. It is like a mind ghost, a possessed entity, pishacham, abhavat. It is akin to, or it is exactly as a possessed entity, pishacha, rakshasasya trishnaya vyaptam. This entity which is possessed by what? It is possessed by a rakshasa. It is possessed by a rakshasa. What is that rakshasa? Trishna. That is that rakshasa. Rakshasi, in fact. The demoness, which is the desire, Trishna. Desire, Trishna. It is possessed by this demoness. It is pervaded by this demoness. What is this desire? It is desire for anything external to oneself. What is the significance, or what is the defining aspect of desire? If you want to identify desire in yourself, how do you identify? Trishna. Trishna means what? Like thirst. By drinking this, I will become not thirsty. My thirst will be satisfied. This is the definition of thirst. Thirst is the feeling because of which one feels, by drinking this, by taking in the water, I will feel absence of thirst. Because of that feeling, I take the water, I put it inside, and I feel the absence of thirst at least for some amount of time. In the same way, this thirst here it is not the physical thirst for water or anything that is being talked about. That Trishna is not being talked about. This is Trishna, this is the desire, this is the thirst for external objects, this is the thirst for sensory objects, this is the thirst for possessing anything or grabbing anything from the world which is not myself, because of which I feel if I take that in, if I possess that object, if I acquire that object, I will be a satisfied person. This feeling is there. That feeling is what we call as Trishna. What is the feeling? The feeling that something beyond me, something apart from me can satisfy me. Something which is not me can satisfy me. That feeling is called Trishna. That can be anything. It can be anything in the world. It can be a car, it can be a house. If I get that house, I will be satisfied. If I get that car, I will be satisfied. If I get that job, I will be satisfied. If I get that person as my spouse, I will be satisfied. If I get a children, I will be satisfied. If people around me behave in a proper way, I will be satisfied. All of this comes under the category of Krishna only. So anything by which I say, if this happens, something which is not available now, if that situation arises or it happens, then I will be satisfied by that situation. In that situation, I will be more happy than I am now. So I am right now not satisfied, not happy by going into a different situation, by acquiring something new, by creating something new, by doing something. I will be a better person. I will become a more satisfied, more happy person. I will gain that satisfaction or happiness which I don't have now. That is the definition of desire or Krishna. That Krishna, that desire, is like a demoness which pervades the mind, and because of this demoness called Krishna which pervades the mind has become like a possessed entity. It is roaming around here and there. That is the simile or the metaphor which is being given here by Prabhupada. So we should look at this example very seriously and understand that neither desire belongs to us, desire belongs to the mind. The mind also is not the self, the mind is not me, but I am given this instrument called the mind, which has its own problems, which need not be appreciated all the time. This is the realization, this is the message that Shastra wants to give us. That message, let us go on to next verse. Dambhabhimana lobhaihi kama krodhoru matsaraish Akrishyate samantat shvabhiriva patitasthrivan marge. Now, another simile is being given to us by Prabhupada about how the mind is dragged. No, the mind was roaming around in several places. Sometimes it loves, sometimes it cries, sometimes it is happy, sometimes it is sad. Sometimes it is possessed by anger, sometimes it is possessed with calmness or pleasure. Various kinds of scenarios arise in the mind because of it being dragged around by various entities. Those entities are being here talked about. What are these entities? Dambha, Abhimana, Lobha, Kama, Krodha, Matsara. So we might have heard about this Arishat Varga, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mata, Matsaryadi. In a different way it is talked about in this verse also. So Kama is at the root of all the problems. What is Kama? That is the demon of desire, the demoness, the Trishna, that is the same as Kama. The feeling that if I get something new, I will be satisfied by that. I will gain happiness. My sorrow will go away. Anything new, it may be anything new. What is new changes. The desire for the specific nature of the desire will change. Sometimes, if I am a very young child, I feel I want a particular toy. Sometimes, as I grow up, then I feel I want a particular, I want to get some bigger play things for me. As I even grow up, then I feel I have to, gain knowledge. That is also there. Yes, gaining knowledge. By gaining knowledge, I will become happy, satisfied. This is also a desire. Or I may feel if this person is my friend, then I will become satisfied. That is another kind of desire. If I go to that place, then I will be satisfied. That is another kind of desire. So as and when the scenario changes, as the person goes through various stages of life, what is being desired for will keep changing. But the nature of desire is that now I am not happy, so satisfied. Now I am not so in a great position. I will be in a much better, greater position. I will be in a more satisfied, more happy position if I gain something which is not there with me currently. This is the common nature of all the desires. So that is kama, that is trishna. Now, when you gain what you want, then you get a feeling that I worked for it and therefore I gained it. That is called mada. That is called, because of that, a certain sense of pride arises. That is dambha. So I am great because I worked for it and I gained it, so I am great. Dambha, abhimana, arrogance, self-pride, pride about oneself, arrogance. Then desire for more, lobha. Since I gained one small thing, my desire is not quenched. The thirst is not quenched. Once you drink water once, immediately it wants more. And if you give it water, it wants something more than water. It wants Coca-Cola. If you give it Coca-Cola, it wants Pepsi. If you give it Pepsi, it wants some other soft drink, then some other drink, and so on. It never stops. The thirst never stops because you feed it with any particular thing. It doesn't get quenched forever. That never happens. Satisfying thirst is not possible by drinking water once. In the same way, satisfying desire is not possible by simply satisfying it that particular one time by gaining whatever you desired for. It's not possible. So, lobha, more and more desires, greed. These set of things happen when you get what you want. Dambha, abhimana, lobha. When you get what you desire for, by either by destiny you get it or by working for it you get it, whatever it may. If it happens that you get it, then you get all these feelings. Dambha, pride, abhimana, self arrogance about oneself. Then lobha, greed for more and more things. All that is gained. If you don't get what you want, now it is not guaranteed that just because we work for something you will get it. If you don't get what you want, then the other kind of emotions follow, which are krodha, that is anger. I worked so much for it, I never got it. So, desire causes anger if the object of desire is not gained. Krodha. Then, if somebody else gains that object of desire, then we get the matsarya, it's a jealousy. I want something, I see that somebody else is having it. Because of that, I am jealous towards that person. So, matsarya. In all these ways, the mind experiences various emotions and sorrow in various forms, as though, it is the second half of the verse, as though it is torn apart by all these emotions, as though dogs are tearing apart a piece of bone which is found on the street. This simile Bhagavad has given once before also in a different context. Now he is giving it in a slightly different context. So just like if multiple dogs are attacking a certain piece of bone, one piece of bone which is lying on the street, and they play, they sort of have a violent game with that bone, each one is pulling it in its own direction, and therefore the bone gets thrown from one end of the road to another by all these dogs. In the same way, the mind also gets thrown around by all these emotions, which are dambha, abhimana, lobha, kama, krodha, matsarya. So akrishyate samantat shvabhiriva patitasthivat marge. So marge, so on the path, patita asthivat, like a bone which is fallen on the street, on the road. Shvabhihi samantad akrishyate, it is pulled in various directions. Samantad, shvabhihi means it is pulled by the dogs in various directions. Akrishyate, it is dragged around in all the possible directions. In the same way as this bone is being dragged around in all the possible directions, the mind is also dragged around in various possible directions because of this various emotions, the root cause of which is kama or trishna, which is possessing the mind. So if you want to solve the problem, if you want to make the mind come to a resting place, make the mind available for Vedanta Vichara, what is to be done? Become free from desire. Very simple. Become free from desire. That is the thing to be done. That is what Prabodha is going to point out in the next shloka. Tasmat Shuddha Virago Manobhilashitam Tyajetartham Tadanabhilashitam Kuryan Nirvyaparam Tato Bhavati. So therefore, the solution to the various problems which are encountered by the mind, the restlessness of the mind, the solution is Shuddha Viragaha. Shuddha Viraha means what? That Viraga which arises from proper understanding about the world, about the mind, about the nature of the objects, sensory objects, and the futility of going behind the sensory objects. So there is a viraga, there is a vaira. Viraga means the lack of desire. Raga is desire, viraga is lack of desire. The nature of having lack of desire is vairagyam. Shuddha vairagyam, Shuddha viragaha. You have to become. That is the idea here. So one has to be free from desires, not free from desires by force, not trying to be free from desires by, in a sort of a very forceful manner. That will only cause freedom from desire very temporarily. It will not cause the peaceful freedom from desires. It causes a very tension-oriented freedom from desire, stress-oriented freedom from desire it may cause. That is not what is being talked about here. What is talked about here is very peaceful and calm freedom from desires. You rise above the desires. In that way you become free. That is Shuddha Viraga. How do you gain the Shuddha Viraga? Acharya has given some pointers before also. Now also he is going to give us more pointers. In Vishaya Inda Prakaranam, he told about the various futility of the various sensory objects. By meditating on the futility of the various sensory objects, one gets freedom from the sensory objects. One raises one's mind above the sensory objects. The same mind which went behind or which desired for the sensory objects will become free from the sensory objects if you tell the mind what are all the problems arising if you go behind the sensory objects. Oh mind, please listen to the problems. Please meditate on the problems for once, and therefore you make a different decision. That is by this Buddhi Shakti, by the intellect which is purified by the Vedanta Shravana, which is purified by the Guru's words, Guru's teachings. This intellect pulls the mind away from the various sensory objects and puts it in the direction of the what we may call as the Shuddha Sattva. That is the purified intellect. Slowly the intellect makes itself, rises itself from impurity to purity. It rises itself from Rajas and Tamas towards Sattva. It rises itself from attachment towards detachment and peace of mind. That is the Shuddha Viraga. That kind of Vairagyam is required here. That kind of pure vairagyam, peaceful vairagya is required here. So tasmat shuddha virago manoabhilashitam tajet artham. Manoabhilashitam artham tyajet. So therefore, that shuddha viraga, that mind, that person who is free, who wants to be free from desire, who wants to be possessed with the shuddha vairagyam, that person has to act in what way? He has to give up. He has to give up the abhilashitam artham. Abhilashitam artham tyajet. So the mind has to give up the desire for whatever it is desiring for. So the mind will have its own desires, but it has to give up the interest in that, give up the desire for that. How do you give up the desire for that? Very simple. Understand that by going behind it, one does not attain happiness forever. One does not attain the peace forever. The shanti does not come to the mind. If you want shanti, if you want peace of mind, if you want permanent happiness, if you want atma sukha, then don't go behind the vishaya sukha. Don't go behind the temporary pleasures which are caused by the sensory objects. And if you don't get the, at least if you get the sensory object, you get pleasure. But if you don't get the sensory objects, then you have only more and more sorrow. So in any case, the journey towards the sensory objects is only going to lead you towards more and more sorrow. By realizing this, you give up the desire for whatever you are desiring for. Oh mind, give up the desire for whatever you are desiring for. That is the idea. Tad anabhilashitam. So if you do this, then what happens? Tad anabhilashitam kuryat. So if you make the mind into something which is desire free, anabhilashitam, something which is not being possessed by this demon is called Krishna or desire, if you do it that way, tad anabhilashitam kuryat nirvyaparam tato bhavati. If it is not possessed by the demon called desire, then it will stop roaming about and be available in one place for your Vedanta, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. This is the point. So we don't want the stability of mind just for stability of mind. Right? So we want the stability of mind for a going towards higher purpose. So going towards higher purpose is what is intentioned here. For that stability of mind is required. That stability of mind is what is known as nirvyapara. Vyapara means it is distributed in various activities. Nirvyapara means it is available in one place for your effort, for your capability, for doing what you really want to do. What is you here? We are talking about the Vedanta sadhaka. That Vedanta sadhaka, whatever the Vedanta sadhaka wants to do, for that purpose the mind has to be available in one place, not distracted and distributed in various other emotions and activities. For that purpose, it has to become free from worldly desires. So therefore, the goal is to be free from worldly desires. Tad anabhilashitam kuryat nirvyaparam tato bhavati. If you make it free from desires, then it becomes nirvyapara. It stabilizes without getting disturbed in it, and it is available for utilizing in a proper way. That is the idea. With this, we will conclude the discussion of this particular prakarana. So the next prakarana, this particular prakarana was Manoninda prakarana. So Manoninda means what? That mind which is the impure mind. That mind which is possessed by desire is being criticized. But we have to convert that into a desire-free mind. The desire-free mind is our friend. It is our friend. It is available for our growth, our improvement, our uplifting. So, Manayeva Manushyanam Karanam Bandha Mokshayoho. It is there in the Shastra. Udharer Atmanatmanam Atmanam Avasadayet. That is also there, Bhagavan has said. So, by uplifting oneself, for one has to put one's own effort. So, what does it mean? That mind which is possessed by desires has to be become free from desires by understanding, by abhyasa and vairagya, by practice of dispassion and the practice of spiritual life, spiritual disciplines of various kinds. Slowly and slowly, one has to elevate oneself with the help of the teachings provided to us by the Shastra and by the Guru. So, that mind which has become free from desires is our friend. That is no longer to be criticized. That is what we want. So, the desire-filled mind is criticized. The desire-free mind is praised. It is because it is going to help us to elevate ourselves into higher spiritual life. So, with this, we will conclude the discussion on Manolinda Prakaranam. These four verses are the forming the short Prakaranam. The next Prakaranam we are going into is the Vishaya Nigraha Prakaranam. So, in this Prakaranam, the how to give up the desire for the sense organs, sense objects, how to restrain the sense organs and keeping all the sense organs to oneself. That is keeping all the sense organs under one's own control and mastery. That is being talked about in this Vishaya Nigraha Prakaranam. So all of these are warnings. At the same time, they are suggestions they are instructions for practice. So both are there. If you don't practice, what happens? That warning is also given. If you practice, what good will come to you? That warning, that instruction. So therefore, practice. That instruction is also given to us. So this discussion we will continue in the next meeting. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.